evening, voters. Today, another defamation plea was quashed and thrown out by the Supreme Court, the same Supreme Court that in the past has upheld the criminal defamation law and said that the right to free speech is not absolute. But that court today said that it is a reporter's job to get the inside information which is not commonly known to everyone. I'm quoting the Supreme Court today and what they said today. It is a reporter's job to get the inside information which is not commonly known. So where does one draw the line then? What is the public discourse supposed to be like? Should there be curbs on criticism? Should there be curbs on questions raised? Do we need a draconian law to ensure that the freedom of press is not misused? Or do we need to have checks and balances in place, especially in today's era, where there is news and platforms and avenues of news dissemination all across us? Do these laws then help keep a check? Here is how the story has begun. Why is it that we are debating it today again? And I want to take you through the case details. Amora Publications, that prints Telugu newspaper Andhra Jyoti, allegedly brought disrepute to YSR Congress Party and its president YS Jagmohan Reddy. That was the basic plea that was filed in the Supreme Court by one of the YSR Congress leaders. The paper had claimed that Jagmohan Reddy had met Prime Minister allegedly to discuss being relieved in the disproportionate case against him that was being investigated by the CBI. His party and his party man claimed that this was a clear case of defamation intended to only bring disrepute to Jagmohan Reddy. That is a case that has been quashed, the plea that has now been quashed by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has said there is nothing defamatory about this news report. But day after day, we see, not just today, this has gone on for decades now, examples where journalists are hounded, harassed, made to run around, threatened with defamation suits. At one point, the 100 crore defamation suits had actually become a joke, which is why it becomes very essential to discuss them today. Where do you draw the line? And I have three very, very simple questions tonight for our guests. Question number one, is a defamation law used to harass the media in our country? Remember, in many countries across the world, they've already done away with this kind of legislature. We still have it. It's been upheld. The criminal defamation law has been upheld by the Supreme Court less than 2 years ago. But does it mean that it gets misused in our country and misused a lot? Question number two, does defamation law take away the freedom of press, the fear that it creates, just the fear of harassment, of blackmailing? Does it take away the freedom of press? And question number three, do India's defamation laws actually need reforms? It's been a big debate going on whether it's too draconian and needs a change. Let's say good evening to our guests. Senior journalist Neerja Chaudhary is with me tonight on The Last Word. I've also got Mr. Gaurang Kant, lawyer Supreme Court. Very soon we'll also try and speak to the editor of Andhra Jyoti and get a sense from him on how the battle was as far as this specific case is concerned. But let me come to you first, Neerja Chaudhary, and ask you the first question that I want to address. Are the defamation laws used in our country over and over again to harass the journalists? Neerja Chaudhary, can you hear me? Okay, we seem to have lost that line. Let's start with you then, Mr. Kant. Your opening remarks, please.
Well, I think it's a welcome judgment by the Supreme Court where, the freedom of the press has been upheld, and the statement which has been actually, the court is very clear on the fact that if there's a reporting, it really is defamatory in the true sense, where there's some sort of an imputation which harms the reputation of the person, then only there is something which is defamatory. I think here the article which has been published, really the court was not really impressed by the defamatory part of the article, and it has held that there's no defamation which has been made out. So I think the Supreme Court time and again has actually been looking into this aspect, and the criminality of the defamation has also been upheld by the Supreme Court, as you rightly pointed out, in 2016. And I think defamation law in India, as far as the law is concerned, is, yes, there's a thin line between freedom of expression as well as defamation, but then whatever is defamatory, there has to be a law which protects that, and that also gives the person who has been defamed the right to move the court, and if there's something which is causing any kind of loss of reputation, the person can definitely exhaust the remedies which are available in law. So I don't really find that there should not be any defamation law, or the entire thing should be done away with, as you were pointing it out. I think there has to be proper check and balance as far as the law is concerned, and I think the courts have done a wonderful job as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, whereby time and again there have been judgments which are enlisting the aspects of defamatory law in this country.
Yes, okay, so let me take this point across to Neeraj Chaudhary. I believe she can hear us now. Good evening, Ms. Chaudhary. Your opening remarks to my question whether you believe that we have enough instances where we see this defamation laws in our country being misused simply to harass journalists or media organizations.
Yes, the defamation laws have been misused. They've been misused by governments, by political parties, by powerful individuals to harass the media when the media has written about things. But whether the defamation laws should not exist, and by the way, today's court judgment is the first piece of good news after a very, very long time about the media. It gives people like me great, heart and encouragement that the courts can really stand up to the rights of the media. So I feel very good about this judgment. But there have been, like for instance, Tamil Nadu, 2-3 years ago, or even the earlier stint of Jayalalitha, huge number of cases, over 100 cases of defamation against journalists, editors. That was Anna DMK ruled government, then the DMK ruled government. Also, maybe not so many, but enough. And we know of so many cases where the media is taken to task because the cases go on for year after year after year and cost a lot of money. A lot of media people, media houses balk at it, and they try for a settlement, and the settlement can mean payment of money, it can mean apology published on the front pages. But where the media, I would say, needs to guard on this is on the accuracy of your facts, and that what you publish is not malicious. And those are the two touchstones. As we fight for the freedom of the media, we must also look inwards and make sure that our facts, we don't go wrong on facts. Opinions have their own place,
with you,
but facts are really
Neeraj
sacrosanct.
Chaudhary, on that aspect. I completely agree with you that there has to be a bit of introspection. There has to be a lot of self-regulation. Before we ask and demand our right to free speech, we must also ensure that we don't misuse it. But like you said, what happened today is a great deal, good news for the media industry. And let me go across to Mr. Kresh Srinivas. He's the editor of Andhra Jyoti. Mr. Srinivas, thank you for speaking with us. Could you take us through the case details of which the judgment has come today, and also through the journey, this fight that you actually took to the legal courtrooms and won today?
Good evening. The story published on 15th May 2017 was written with professional spirit. Actually, there was a meeting took place between Narendra Modi and YSRCP Chief Jagan Mohan Reddy. Our report interpreted and reported the meeting as if Jagan Mohan Reddy approached the CM, approached the Prime Minister to look into the cases pending with CBI. But the party, YSRCP MP approached the court that this is defamatory, and Andhra Pradesh, Hyderabad High Court ruled out the contention and said that the petitioner has no locus standi. Now the MP approached the Supreme Court the Supreme Court now ruled today that there is nothing defamatory in the news report.
Let me ask
It's a victory not only for Andhra Jyoti, but also for whole media, I believe.
Yes, it is. And congratulations to you for taking this battle and to the courts and bringing us this news, Mr. Srinivas. Do you believe that often, not just today, but in the past as well, specifically politicians have used the defamation tool to unnecessarily target and silence the media?
Yes, they do. They are doing that. We are facing a number of cases against us and also against us also and many fellow media establishment also. They frequently approach courts and contesting our interpretations or comments or the very information itself.
Mr. Srinivas, we are having a debate tonight, and so before I let you go, I just wanted your thoughts on it. The debate is on defamation laws, whether they need to be reformed, and in today's day and age, does the media also need to introspect a little bit before we demand absolute right to free speech? Where do you stand on the overall debate on defamation?
Yeah, media has to be responsible in reporting. We believe in professionalism, but there are certain occasions when we have to interpret things and we have to comment on things basing on circumstantial things. So media has to have the leverage to comment not as it likes, but in the interest of people, in the interest of readers.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Srinivas, for speaking to us, because it's a job. Our job is literally public duty, public service. What we do, the stories that we bring are to be in public's interest, to bring the truth out to them. That's exactly what we need to do. The idea is to bring out information, and I love how Supreme Court has said that today, that it is a reporter's job to bring you the inside information that is not commonly known to everyone. So, Mr. Kant, and we've seen this in the past, during Jayalalitha's tenure as Chief Minister, 213 defamation cases were filed against her opponents and against the media organizations, individual journalists, small-time, media houses, for simply what they call, the government called, the party called, derogatory remarks. Now, don't you think that was a bit of stretch? Don't you think that happens in several of our other states even today?
Comments as collateral
to
things
misuse
and not to be
laws in this country, and probably they have sort of harassed the reporters too. But then at the same time, we have to really look at the role of the courts. The courts have not been very inclined to really pass any kind of orders as far as the defamation is concerned, until the actual ingredients of defamations are met, and the courts have been very selective in actually passing any rulings. If you actually recall,
no, but
I have not really seen any journalist going to jail for any truthful reporting. So
that's
I mean, yes, you have to go through the grind of litigation, but at the same time,
the idea is to make the journalists go through the whole grind.
That is not the point of defamation law. That is something which is there in our legal system, whereby all litigation takes a lot of time, and that is something which is inherent in our judicial system. So we can't really say that, defamatory law, the defamation law which pertains to defamation is a slow process. I mean, one has to go through the grind, whether it is defamation or it's a murder trial or any other trial. That is the judicial system in our country. So, but yes, it has been misused, but the courts have been very selective, and I think the judgments which are being passed, and today I think the Supreme Court very clearly and categorically has stood by the journalist and has passed this order whereby they say that, the reporting which is being done by the journalist, it is something which is in their realm and they can do it. But at the same time, when I say this, at the same breath, I say that, a lot of responsible reporting needs to be done. A lot of time we have seen those reportings which are not really truthfully right. So that is something which needs to be looked into too.
So how do we change this? How do we change this Completely, and I'm going to actually read out two different instances where Supreme Court has actually commented when they upheld criminal defamation in 2016. They said, right to free speech is not absolute. It does not mean freedom to hurt anyone's reputation, which is protected under Article 21 of the Constitution. So yes, dissent is required, but it does not grant an unfettered right to damage somebody's reputation. That was a bench that comprised Justice Deepak Mishra at that point of time when the judgment was actually given. But the Supreme Court also went on to denounce the practice of ruling parties misusing defamation laws, Neerja Chaudhary, because the same bench also said that such acts also amount to curbing of free speech, that defamation laws cannot be used as a political weapon. So where do you draw the line? Does it mean that our laws need an actual change so that it doesn't become such an easy tool? Maybe we need to start punishing those petitioners who just use it as a tool to harass media.
I would think, here there are two rights pitted against each other in some way. There is the right of a private individual to protect his or her reputation from onslaught, from being maligned, and that's also a very important right, that you give the person, an individual, the right to redressal through the defamation law. The second is the right of the freedom of the press, also guaranteed by our Constitution, where the press must report on what's going wrong. The press must highlight if there is a politician who's corrupt. The press must highlight injustices, demands for accountability. That's what our democracy is all about. If the media doesn't do that, it's not worth its salt. So sometimes these rights will get pitted. Therefore, I make my earlier point, it's so very important for the media to be responsible, to, you find some information, somebody will give you an offer, you know, and I know that when so-called thieves fall out, we get access to information in our country. So somebody has a motive often to give you that information against their opponent with whom they have fallen out. That's where the big scoops come from within the system. Now, as a journalist, I must try, while not questioning the intention, because the facts have stand on their own merit, I must try and corroborate as much as possible that what information that is being given to me is correct. Therefore, the emphasis on documents, etc. I think in this day of competitive journalism, where you're all the time competing with others to get the better of them, to break news, to have scoops, often this is given a go-by. You just catch hold of something and put that out as information without necessarily checking. And I think somewhere I agree with you, somewhere we've got to look within, particularly in this day of social media, which thrives on irreverence. And that's a good part also, because as I say, that ordinary citizen is also a journalist in terms of what they put out on the social media. But facts must really be sacrosanct, and we must really bend over backwards to make sure that we are not damaging reputations, but we are really bringing information to the public domain, which is the hallmark of a alive democracy.
Fair enough. Mr. Kant, you want to come in on this? The question also is that how do we ensure that the tool doesn't get misused? Do you believe there some kind of change in the law is needed so that people don't take it for granted that you just file one plea and the media house and the journalists will keep running around? Because at the end of the day, no reporter really has the bandwidth, the financial support or the time to run around to appear for these appearances, which you have to do because it's the court and you must respect it, to pay the legal fees, to bring about the justification, to even divulge your sources. Sometimes that's also becomes difficult. We don't even have a law that protects our sources for us. So is there a need for a law that says if you try and misuse this to target the media, then you will be made to pay for it?
Well, I think I'll just take it from where Ms. Chaudhary has actually left. We need to, really see the sort of reporting which is also being done by the media, these stories which are being put out there are a lot of times when people become very much interested in information which might not be true. And I think more research and more, effort needs to really go in the information which is being provided to a journalist. And before he really writes any story, he really needs to corroborate and make sure that whatever he is putting out there is factually correct. So I think a lot of emphasis really needs to go behind the story as far as factual correctness of the story is concerned. And when you say that it is not that easy to really file for defamation, in the sense anybody who's trying to make out a case definitely files it with the court. The reason why it takes time is because of our judicial process, as I pointed it out. But any matter really needs to be established as far as the court is concerned. The court is really going to look into the evidence which is being put forth by anybody who's alleging any sort of defamation. It is not that easy for anybody to misuse the current law which is in place. A person really needs to satisfy the conscience of the court, whereby any kind of imputation is being made to damage the reputation of a person. The publication has to be seen, whether it is libel or slander. I mean, all these aspects are definitely going to weigh on the mind of the court. So it is not that easy that anybody would just file a case and the court would blindly not really look into the evidence and see whether it is actually causing any sort of damage to the reputation of the person concerned.
A plea, Mr.
So,
Kant,
the court really looks into it.
What I'm trying to do is differentiate here between admitting the plea and passing a verdict. And of course, all of us have faith in the judiciary to say that when we do honest and bold and investigative reporting, we have the faith in the judiciary that tomorrow if somebody asks us the question and tries, vindictive or motivated targeting against us, the judiciary will stand by us. But that is not to say that there is this whole a process that one has to go through. I am saying, how do you nip it at the bud? Nisha Chaudhary, how do you nip it at the bud to say somebody thinks twice before filing a frivolous plea?
If something is provided,
most countries in today's world don't even have defamation laws in the country.
Can always use it, but then what I'm saying is that what the court can really do is court can always start putting heavy penalty and fines on people who are filing these kind of frivolous litigation. So that is something which can have a deterring effect. That is something which will stop people from filing or thinking at least twice before they actually go to the court. So I think the court can heavily come down on petitions which are being filed frivolously, just trying to harass the journalist or the media person. So I'm sure the court can really do that. And with these kind of judgments which today has come, I think that is something which is actually a welcome step in that direction. And I'm sure the court is going to evolve methods by where they can come down heavily on people who file these kind of petitions. That is something which is always in the domain of the court.
Yes, exactly my point. Because Nisha Chaudhary, let's now try and differentiate this. While all of us admit that yes, there is perhaps a lot more of restraint and regulation that we need to do to ensure what we put out there is hard, true facts and nothing else. But if you keep aside that aspect and you talk about defamation across the world now, in this day and age of social media, in this day and age of fake news or paid news, even in US, they don't have such stringent laws.
I think, I agree with you that frivolous cases, if the courts would put penalty, then that will be a deterrent, will be a very good move to have. And also, you can legitimately make mistakes, even in getting information, but that doesn't mean you should slap on a defamation case against a journalist or a media house, because they need not have been malicious, as I said earlier. But I think overall, there is the attitude, towards the media that I find very worrying. Is the legitimate role that a media has to play, a journalist has to play in a democratic setup, I think there is a lack of appreciation, there is a diminishing appreciation of that by different political parties, by governments. The general view that has been growing or gaining currency is that the media should really do propaganda for the incumbent government or the political party in power at the center or in the states. So there is also an element of contempt that has crept in about the media. Whereas, you know, the media, when it writes things that are going wrong in society, the whole idea was that they could be redressed. If I'm not writing about what I see going wrong around me and only praising the government, then what is my role? I might as well be doing something else. So how do I hold the government of the day to be accountable? That is the essential role of the media, and the media highlighting wrongdoings in society, in governments. So I think just as there is a role for the executive, for parliament, for judiciary, there is also a rightful, legitimate role of the media. And I think there is, as I said, a diminishing appreciation of that as we've gone along. And that is where the trouble comes. So if the media makes a mistake, there can be an apology, you move on.
Yes.
But when you file a defamation case, it is to cow down the media. The attempt is, you know, you do this and we will teach you a lesson.
Yes, and I'll tell you why. There's another trend that points towards the same thing. I don't want to dwell too deep into it because it takes us away from the main topic. But even if you see in the last few years, the kind of defamation suits that have been filed, it's not so much against these frivolous website portals, these fake news portals, and the propaganda news that goes about on social media. It's against actual serious mainstream media doing some investigative reporting. So if the laws were to be used for the right purposes, we're not even seeing those examples. That has just now become an excuse to try and threaten and harass the media. That has become a big problem from where I stand and see this. Let me go across to some of our viewers and get their view as well, as we always do on The Last Word. Neville is calling us from Mumbai. Good evening, Neville. Neville, just mute the volume of the news channel so that we can hear you better.
Hello?
Yes, Neville Misri.
Hello?
Good evening. Go ahead, please. Yes, we can. Just mute the TV channel because there's a lag between the live and the what you get at your homes.
Hi, good evening. First of all, let me congratulate the Supreme Court for the superb verdict.
Go on.
Neja Chowdhury, madam, in which she says the media has to be acting responsibly. And that's just about the case. But I'm happy that the Supreme Court has given this judgment.
Okay, all right, Neville, thanks so much for calling us and sharing your views. That's Neville saying that he's glad that that order has come. It's actually, Mr. Chaudhary, don't you think it's also a message to all of us to remind us that the job is to report on the inside information, what is not commonly known to everyone?
I agree with you. It's also a message to us. We've got to get to the heart of the story, the inside information, work very hard, do legwork, and you know, this freedom that we have is very, very precious. And I would say, you know, at the end of it, when you look, if you pit one against the other, I would say it is better to err on the side of more freedom than less freedom in a democracy.
So here's my third question and the last one, which is to say that does India's defamation laws need reforms? Mr. Kant, when was the last time we actually saw any change in these reforms? The media is changing. The medium has changed. The way we report, the topics we report on, what the audience wants to really see, all of that has changed. Have our laws really caught up?
Well, absolutely. I think the judgment of the Supreme Court in 2016 very clearly and categorically has seen the defamation law and very closely has monitored the defamation law and has upheld the validity as far as the criminality of the defamation law is concerned. So I think the Supreme Court time and again has actually been looking into the defamation law and has been making changes in the defamation law as far as the law is concerned, upholding the validity. I think today's judgment, again, we all know that Supreme Court lays down the law. As far as the section is concerned, there has been interpretation, and today's judgment, again, is a very welcome step as far as the defamation law is concerned. It has given a lot of freedom to the press. It has actually identified that reporting which is being done by the press is something which is in their
yes,
domain.
Yes, Mr. Kant, but as of 2017, India ranked one. I know you're saying that the Supreme Court has given us the freedom, and we completely appreciate that, and we are glad that at least the judiciary is doing that.
I think
but as of 2017,
well
India ranked 137 as far as the World Press Freedom Index is concerned. We were actually lagging and were behind Palestine, Philippines, Afghanistan, Maldives, Nepal, Ecuador, Nigeria, Ghana, all of these countries. At the drop of the hat today...
I think freedom of speech is not only curtailed as far as defamation is concerned.
Yeah. Doesn't it add to it? The threat of a defamation suit, 100 crore, 500 crore defamation suit?
I think the judgment which you were quoting earlier also has very well identified the freedom of speech. Well, I think all the judgments which have been, all the rulings which have come from the Supreme Court very well identifies the freedom of speech and has only talked about certain restrictions at the time when it is needed. I mean, we need to really have checks and balances in the system. And if we don't really have that, I think any organ, be it the judiciary, be it the press, be it anyone, would just definitely go haywire. So I think the laws in the country are well in place. And I think, the Supreme Court has time and again ruled, and there are certain judgments which have actually been upholding the validity of the law as far as the defamation is concerned in this country. And I really don't see that is being misused. But yes, there are certain loopholes in the system which allows it to be misused, and as I pointed it out, we can definitely plug it in, and we should try and make an endeavor to do that.
Okay,
and
I'm
sure
running out of time. I've got the last caller on the phone line. Venkat is calling us from Hyderabad. Mr. Kant, I get your point. Sorry, but I'm interrupting you. You're running out of time. Venkat on the phone line. Good evening, Venkat. Where do you stand on this debate?
Yeah, good evening, ma'am. So, thanks for allowing me. I want to tell one thing, but how many media houses are behaving like media? Come to Andhra Jyoti, let me know. I am from Telugu state. It belongs to Telugu state. Okay, it is run by aid of Chandrababu Naidu, a TDP party CM. Okay, and Jagan Mohan Reddy have his own media house called Saksi. These two media houses daily they fought each other. They don't care of people issues. They don't care of anything. They don't care of bifurcation of Andhra Pradesh. They don't care of what we have to get from central government and all. They fight each other. They file a defamation case is on both sides. And so how can we call those two media houses as media?
Yes, there you're saying, you're also making the point that we were making here, Venkat, and that there are questions that are now more often than earlier being raised on the integrity of the media houses. Keep watching Mirror now, because here our only focus is you, the voter. We don't really care about politics on one party versus the other and who has what propaganda, and that our viewers have very clearly acknowledged. I'm completely out of time on this show. The debate obviously continues. Here are some other facts I wanted to put across to our viewers, especially at a time when we are getting so much of bad press for the kind of reportage that the Indian media is doing. In 2017, 11 journalists were killed in our country. 46 more were attacked. 12 were threatened with actual official complaints and investigations were done. 27 faced police action, including detentions, arrests, and case filed. This is as per a media watchdog, the Hoot. On the global rankings, we are far, far behind than any other developed country or developing country when it comes to press freedom. At the drop of the hat in our country, now politicians have started using the privilege motion in the assemblies and the parliaments to target journalists who they are not content with, who they feel are writing negative information about netas. Privilege notices are being issued and journalists are being harassed like that. So defamation notices, privilege notices, violence against journalists, journalists being killed in cold blood and actual murderers not being found, that too has become the truth in our country. So for everyone who actually raises questions about what the media is really doing about fake news that is out there, also think about those journalists who are actually trying to do a good job and are being silenced or threatened or harassed every day for it. For those people we stand up, and for those people we ask these questions. We are glad that the Supreme Court has said what it did today and has clearly reminded us that our job is to get you the inside information, the truth, as the fourth estate, the truth that nobody else, not the government, not the babus, not the netas, no one will tell you, not even the banks. And sometimes their regulators tell you, as has been very clear with the 11,000 crores scam. Thank you so much to both of our panelists for joining us. Thank you, voters, for joining us.